My name is Andrea. I'm 32, and this New Year's Eve I drove 5 hours to find out exactly where I stand in my own family. The trip from my cramped apartment to the edge of Fresno wasn't about fireworks or champagne. It was about one more chance to believe that showing up still meant something, that I wasn't just the relative people remembered when money was tight. When I turned into my brother's mobile home park, every unit on his row was lit. Music bled through the thin walls. Kids shouted over some game in the street. Silhouettes moved across his living room window. Coats crowded the porch rail. Paper plates sat by the door, the kind of clutter that says, "Everyone's already here." I let myself believe everyone included me. I cut the engine, picked up the small box on the passenger seat, and walked up the steps. I didn't rehearse anything. I just knocked. 3 quick taps, the way I always had. The door swung open hard enough to shove warm air into my face. My brother stared like I'd shown up at the wrong address. His eyes dropped to the box in my hands, then slid past me toward the parking lot, like he was hoping no one else had noticed. "Real family only," he said, voice flat. Then he shut the door. I stood there on the thin wooden porch, fingers going numb around the cardboard, and understood this wasn't just another awkward holiday. This was a line being drawn in permanent ink. Before I tell you what he said, and what happened after I walked out, tell me, what time is it for you right now? And where are you watching from? I'm curious to see how far this story will travel. Back in the driver's seat, the noise from the party turned into a dull vibration through the glass behind me. I set the small box on the passenger seat and stared at my hands on the wheel. They were steady, which almost surprised me. My chest felt tight, but there were no tears, no flood of anger, just a heavy blank space where hope had been sitting on the drive-in. The gate to the mobile home park was still open. A couple of cars rolled past, headlights washing over my windshield, people laughing as they headed toward the sound I had just been shut out of. I didn't turn the key yet. I just watched the dashboard clock crawl forward, 1 minute at a time. My phone lay face down in the cup holder. Part of me expected it to light up with a text saying it was a joke, that he was just being dramatic, that someone else had insisted on keeping it family only, and he'd gone along with it. Another part of me knew better. My brother had not sounded uncertain. He had sounded like a bouncer reading a rule off a sheet. After a while, I put the car in gear and eased away from his unit, taking the long loop around the row so I wouldn't have to drive back past his windows. The music got softer, replaced by the hum of my engine and the rattle I kept meaning to get checked. The box slid a little on the seat with each turn, the cheap wrapping paper crinkling in the dark, a reminder that I had still shown up with something in my hands. I reached the corner of the park and pulled over for a moment, more out of habit than need. That was when my phone buzzed. The screen lit up with my mom's name. For a second, my stomach lifted in reflex, like maybe she had stepped outside, realized I was gone, and wanted to know what happened. I flipped the phone over and saw the preview of the message. Why would that loser even show up? There was no typo, no missing emoji to soften it. Just that one sentence, sitting under her contact photo. Underneath it, 3 little dots blinked, then disappeared. She hadn't meant to send it to me. I could see the thread above, the last few messages from earlier in the day, her asking what time people were arriving, him saying he would keep it simple this year. I was never mentioned. The message hadn't popped up into a family group chat or a long, chaotic thread. It was a direct text, dropped straight into the conversation where she usually asked whether I was working late or if I had eaten. The casual cruelty of it knocked the air out of my chest more than my brother's words on the porch had. I didn't answer. I didn't call. I didn't type out the 100 furious comebacks that flashed through my head and delete them one by one. I locked the screen and let the phone buzz again in my hand, then set it back down. Cars kept rolling past, turning into the park, leaving the park, living in a world where New Year's Eve meant countdowns and cheap champagne and matching pajamas. In my car, time felt different. Every minute stretched, replaying tiny moments I had ignored. The way my brother avoided eye contact when I mentioned my own bills, the way my mom brushed past any mention of my life but remembered the exact due dates on his. I thought about how many times I had picked up my phone to move money around just this once, how many late fees I had quietly covered so his kids wouldn't wake up to shut-off notices taped to their door. I knew the names of their utility companies, their internet provider, their cell carrier, because all those accounts lived under my login. My brother got to complain about how tight things were while I ate cheap dinners and told myself it was what family did. Seeing that line from my mom, so clean and final, snapped something that had been fraying for years. It wasn't just him shutting the door. It was her question behind it, as if my showing up at all was some kind of nerve. The clock on the dash slid past another 10 minutes. My hands were still on the wheel, but whatever part of me kept driving back into their orbit was finally letting go. I watched the light at the park entrance cycle from red to green, felt the car behind me tap its horn, and then I pressed my foot down and left their street. And the whole park behind me. By the time I hit the freeway, the park was only a faint glow in my rearview mirror. I drove until the trailers and streetlights blurred behind me, then took the first exit with a gas station and a strip of signs still lit. The lot was mostly empty. A few trucks hugged the edges, engines idling. I pulled into a space near the side of the building, shifted into park, and let my hands fall from the wheel. The quiet inside the car sharpened every small sound. The heater fan, the ticking engine, the buzz of my phone in the cup holder. I reached into the back seat for my bag and pulled out the old laptop I used for work. The hinge creaked when I opened it on my knees, propped between me and the steering wheel. I did not have a detailed plan, just one clear thought that had been building since my mother's message arrived. If I did not count as family at their door, then my money did not belong in their survival plan. I typed in the first login I remembered, the home internet. The browser filled in the details for me. I landed on a dashboard I had not looked at since setting up autopay. My name in the corner, my card there, their address on the service line. I scrolled to the billing section, turned off automatic payments, removed my card, and changed the contact information so any future notices would come to me. It took less than a minute. One favor, gone with a few clicks. Next came the electric account. I had only meant to help with a past due notice once, long enough to keep the heat on through a cold week. Somehow my card had stayed on file after that, the charge sliding out of my account every month while I watched my own thermostat. I dug through emails, found the login, reset the password, and did the same thing there. No more autopay, no more quiet withdrawal. The phone plan was worse. I had added my brother as an extra line back when a promotion made it cheaper for both of us. When his card kept declining, my bank started covering the full amount. The bill looked harmless, broken into neat little lines, each one labeled with a name that was not mine. Now, staring at the history, I saw those neat lines stacking into a wall. One by one, I moved through everything tied to my wallet. A streaming service my nieces used, a music subscription my brother liked, a same-day delivery membership my mother leaned on for last-minute groceries. In every account, the pattern repeated. My name, their address, their comfort. My phone buzzed again. I glanced at it long enough to see my brother's name on the screen, then turned it face down. I let it ring until it dropped to voicemail. To keep my hands busy, I opened a blank document on the laptop and started a list. Not for them. For me. I went back through my banking app, month by month, writing down every time money left my account with their address attached. A winter gas bill, a past due notice, grocery transfers, emergency vet appointments for their dog, deposits for school activities so the kids would not be the only ones without matching shirts. The entries crawled down the page in a long column. I wrote the totals in words next to each year, forcing myself to see them as more than transactions. A few $100s, then a few thousand. 3 years of, we just need a little help, adding up to more than $20,000 I was never going to see again. The longer I typed, the steadier I felt. This was not revenge. Not exactly. I was not breaking into anything or cutting them off from something that belonged to them. I was stepping out of a role I had never agreed to play. No one had asked whether I could afford to keep doing this. They had learned that I would and built their plans on that. Another call came in, then another. My mother, then my brother again, then a number I did not recognize that was almost certainly the same plea from a different phone. I silenced the ringer and let the notifications stack while I finished the list. When I finally reached the last month, I read the total twice. The figures sat there in plain text, undeniable, larger than anything I had managed to put into my own savings in the same stretch of time. I sat back against the seat, the laptop warm on my legs, and felt a steady anger settle in my chest. Outside, someone pulled into the row and went inside for coffee. Inside my car, I saved the document, closed every tab tied to my family's bills, and shut the laptop with both hands, as if I were closing a door they had assumed they controlled. Morning didn't ask for my permission to show up. It just seeped in around the blinds while my phone shook itself across the nightstand. Sleep came in short, thin pieces. Every time I drifted off, another vibration dragged me back up. Another buzz that said someone on the other end had finally noticed what I had done. When the buzzing stopped, the silence felt heavier than the noise. When I opened my eyes for good, the room was a washed-out gray and my phone screen glowed with a wall of notifications. The lock screen didn't bother with previews. It just stacked the numbers. Missed calls, voicemails, texts, a small icon from my bank app, another from a utility company. Every corner of the display wanted something. I picked it up and saw the count, 61 missed calls. I read the number twice, then let the phone rest in my hand, as if dropping it might somehow drop the responsibility that came with being the person everyone dialed when something went wrong. I started with the texts. My mother had sent 3 messages after the one she never meant me to see. The first was a rushed explanation about typing too fast, about her eyes being tired, about how she meant to send that to someone else. The second asked whether I had gotten home safely. The third said she did not understand why I was being so sensitive. My brother's thread was messier, his messages stacked in bursts, switching from confused to annoyed to demanding. He wanted to know why the internet said my card had been declined, whether I had changed something on the phone plan because his line had been flagged, what I thought I was doing. None of his questions included the word sorry. I swiped past his name and opened my bank app. A banner at the top confirmed what I already knew. Several recurring payments had been canceled. Below that, the list of drafts from the night before sat in a neat column. Every one of them mine. Email notifications crowded my inbox. The home internet provider, the electric company, the phone carrier, each confirming changes to billing and contact details. The language was neutral, almost cheerful, as if I had simply updated a mailing address. A voicemail badge blinked on the screen. For a long minute, I considered deleting the whole stack without listening. Instead, I tapped the icon, put the phone on speaker, and set it beside me on the pillow. My brother's voice filled the room first. He sounded irritated, like a customer who had been placed on hold. He talked about the kids and how upset they would be if their shows froze in the middle of an episode, about how the timing was terrible because it was a holiday and nothing could get resolved quickly. He never said my name. He called me you and her, as if someone else might be listening with me. The next voicemail was from my mother. Her tone was softer, but the shape of the message was the same. She circled around what had happened on the porch without naming it, then drifted into a suggestion that I let this go so the holiday would not be ruined. Listening to both of them, it struck me how completely they skipped past the moment I had been turned away. Their focus had already shifted to the fallout. The only problem they could see was the disruption of services, not the years of unpaid debt that had led to them leaning on me in the first place. Mixed in with their voices was one notification I had not expected: an email from the office that managed the mobile home park where my brother lived. The subject line had my full name in it. I opened it and scanned the first few lines. The message referenced our prior paperwork, the application we had submitted together when he first moved into the park. It thanked me for being the responsible party on the account and noted that any change to payment status would be reflected on both of our records. I thought it was a mistake. Then I remembered the afternoon in the small office near the park entrance, the pen in my hand, the way my brother had said his credit just needed a little help. I had signed because the manager had assured us it was standard, because my mother had said it was temporary, because I believed I could hold the weight a little longer. Now the weight had a digital trail, tidy and formal, pointing straight back to me. I closed the email and set the phone face down on the bed. Their calls and panic and explanations bounced against the same truth. They had built a structure on the assumption that I would keep standing underneath it. For the first time, I let myself consider what it would mean to step out from under all of it, not just the easy parts. Days later, my brother's face showed up on my screen while I was scrolling without really seeing anything. I was halfway through a lukewarm cup of coffee on my lunch break, sitting in my car outside work, when a coworker's story rolled to the next clip. The audio jumped before I could tap away. There he was, framed in shaky vertical video, standing in his kitchen with the blinds drawn and a small banner that said, "Happy New Year," still hanging crooked behind him. The caption across the bottom read, "Some people just vanish when you need them most." He talked about how hard the holiday had been, how certain family members had cut off support out of nowhere, how the kids did not understand why their shows kept freezing and why the lights had flickered the night before. He didn't use my name. He didn't have to. People who knew us would know exactly who he meant. In the comments, hearts and sad face emojis floated up in long strings. People wrote about how unfair it was, how family should always show up, how he was doing his best. Someone asked whether they had a Cash App. Someone else offered to drop off groceries. No one asked what had happened before the screens went dark. I tapped the 3 dots on the corner of the story and saved the clip to my phone. My coworker had already moved on to a video of her dog knocking over a lamp. The feed did what it always did. It stacked one moment on top of another and kept going. Sitting there in the parking lot, I felt less angry than tired. I had spent years bending over backwards to keep my brother from feeling embarrassed about his money problems. And there he was, telling the same story, just with a different villain this time. He was not lying, not exactly. Things were hard for him. He just left out the part where he had treated my effort like a faucet he could turn on and off without ever touching the bill. When my break ended, I went back inside, answered emails, and moved through the afternoon on autopilot. The saved video sat like a weight in my pocket. Every time my phone buzzed, I expected another notification from him, from my mother, from someone who had watched that clip and decided they knew the whole story. That night, I pulled out the folder I kept at the back of my closet. It was thicker than I remembered. Application forms, copies of leases, printouts from my email, notes I had scribbled during phone calls with people from offices whose names my brother never bothered to learn. Near the middle, there was the packet from the mobile home park. The top page had my handwriting on the signature line. Underneath, the sections that spelled out what being a responsible party meant sat in tight blocks of text. Late payments, notices, collections, credit reporting. I read every line this time instead of skimming for the parts that sounded reassuring. Nothing there said I had to keep supplementing someone else's decisions forever. The pages said I could be held liable if the account fell apart, but they also said I had the right to contact the office, to ask questions, to update information. They listed a phone number and an email address for the manager. My brother had always presented the arrangement as something he controlled. He was the one who handed over keys, who decided who came over, who stayed the night, who parked in the narrow driveway. I had let myself believe that meant he was the one who carried the responsibility too. The paperwork said otherwise. I set the folder on my kitchen table, opened my laptop, and pulled up the email from the park office again. The message mentioned the same manager who had watched us sign 3 years earlier. I typed their address into a new message and stared at the blank body of the email for a long minute. Then I started writing. I did not tell a story. I did not talk about holidays or hurt feelings. I stuck to facts. I asked them to clarify exactly what my obligations were as the responsible party on the account. I asked what would happen if payment stopped, and whether there was a process for removing myself from future liability. I asked what, if anything, I needed to do to make sure their records reflected who was actually living there and who was paying. When I hit send, a confirmation box popped up for a second, then disappeared. The email slid into my sent folder. The house in Fresno did not shake. No one's power went out. Nothing exploded. For the first time, though, I had spoken directly to the people on the other side of the paperwork instead of letting my brother interpret everything for me. That felt like its own kind of shift. The park manager's reply came before the week was over. The subject line looked routine, but my stomach still tightened when I opened it at my kitchen table. The email was brief. They confirmed I was listed as the responsible party on the account. As long as payments stayed current, the lot remained in good standing, but serious delinquency could be reported under my name. If I no longer wanted that risk, I could send a written request to remove myself. Then my brother would have to reapply on his own. If he did not qualify or failed to respond, the tenancy could be terminated after notice. It was not personal. It was procedure. I read the message again, then opened a new document and drafted the letter they said I would need. I listed the lot number, the date on the application, my status as responsible party. I stated that I was no longer willing to carry liability for an address I did not control, and asked that my name be removed from future obligations. I requested that all communication about the account be sent to me in writing. When I finished, I printed the letter, signed it, and set it by the door with my keys. The first ripples hit before I even mailed it. A text from my brother snapping that the phone company had flagged the account again. A voicemail from my mother saying the park office had posted a notice on his door and asking whether I had done something. An email from the utility company warning about a past due balance that, for once, did not reach my card. I did not answer. On my lunch break, I took the letter to the post office, paid for tracking, and watched the clerk stamp the certified receipt. Walking back to my car, I realized I was not asking myself whether I was allowed to step away anymore. I was just putting paperwork behind a decision I had already made. 2 evenings later, someone knocked on my apartment door. The sound started as a polite tap, then grew more insistent. The lights were on and my car was in its usual spot. I wiped my hands on a dish towel, walked down the hallway, and looked through the peephole. My brother stood on the landing, shoulders hunched, hands buried in his jacket. I opened the door far enough to stand in the frame. "They said you went to the office," he said. "They told me you sent something." His tone carried accusation, the same expectation as always that anything involving him should run through him first. "I asked what my obligations were," I said, "and I told them I am not willing to be responsible for your account anymore." He shook his head. "Do you get what that means for us? They said I might have to reapply. If my credit does not clear, we could lose the lot. Do you understand what that looks like with the kids and everything already tight?" What I understood was that he had never asked what any of it looked like from my side. "The notices are in your name now," I said. "That is what changed." "That is not it," he snapped. "You pulled your card from everything at the worst time. Holiday, cold, kids out of school. You made us look like we cannot even keep our own lights on. Made us look like, as if a cancelled autopay altered reality instead of exposing it. I stopped paying bills that were never mine, I said. You built your plans around that without being honest about it. His expression tightened. We are family, he said. You do not just walk away when it stops being convenient. For years, that line had worked. This time, it did not. I did not walk away when it was hard, I said. I walked away when carrying your choices started to crush mine. He looked past me into my apartment. No tree, no leftover decorations, no pile of gifts. Just a small couch, a table with my own bills lined up in a neat row, and a life that had not made the guest list at his New Year's gathering. They are talking about termination notices, he said, voice lower. Timelines. What happens if I cannot qualify a loan? Do you really want to be the reason your own family gets pushed out of their place? I am not the reason you are in this position, I said. I was the reason you stayed out of it as long as you did. He stood there for a few seconds, jaw tight, then stepped back from the landing. He did not ask me to think about it or promise to call later. For the first time, he left without handing me a new problem to solve. When I closed the door, the latch slid into place with a soft click. It sounded less like an ending than an adjustment, weight finally settling where it belonged. In the weeks that followed, the fallout showed up in paper instead of raised voices. The first envelope came from the mobile home park. A copy of my certified letter was stapled to the front of their response. They acknowledged my request and laid out a short timeline. Once their process finished, I would no longer be listed as the responsible party. On the back page, a separate notice was addressed to my brother, explaining that he would have to reapply on his own and what could happen if he did not qualify or chose not to try. Another envelope arrived from a company whose logo I recognized from years of statements. It was a final update on a payment arrangement I had once set up on his behalf. The balance was now his alone, and any missed payments would follow his file instead of mine. None of it felt dramatic. It was just systems reacting when the quiet subsidy disappeared. I did not call to warn him. I did not forward the emails or send screenshots. For the first time since we were teenagers, I let my brother be the main contact for his own life. If he wanted answers, the phone numbers were printed on every notice. News about what happened next came sideways. A cousin mentioned in a group chat that my brother was packing. Someone else said my parents were helping them land somewhere for a while. I muted the thread. Later, I scrolled past a photo of my nieces on a different couch in a different living room. Cardboard boxes behind them. The caption said, "Fresh start." No one tagged me. I did not need the details to fill in the blanks. Years of watching due dates and late fees had already shown me how the steps go when the numbers stop lining up. It was a slow tightening. Notices, warnings, applications. My money had delayed that process. My absence simply stopped shielding them from it. I did not feel proud of that. I did not feel triumphant. Sitting at my own table with my own stack of bills and a savings account finally moving in the right direction, what I felt was a steady, unfamiliar peace. The last strands between us frayed on their own. Messages from my mother slid from urgent paragraphs to brief notes about her book club or the weather. I answered when I had the energy with polite replies. I did not talk about money or holidays or whether we would all be together again. Eventually, even those texts slowed. My brother stayed quiet after the day he stood on my landing. I left the distance exactly where it was. I did not send transfers on birthdays. I did not drive 5 hours for the next holiday. When the calendar slid toward another New Year's, I made plans that had nothing to do with anyone else's countdown. I worked my shift, went home, cooked a small meal just for myself, and watched fireworks on a screen I paid for. What I could control was this. I stopped auditioning for a place in a family that only treated me as necessary when my card was on file. If there is anything I hope you take from this, it is not that cutting people off is simple or painless. It is that there is a difference between helping someone through a hard season and letting them build their entire foundation on your back. Love does not require you to pretend your limits do not exist, or to stay quiet while someone else spends your future. If you are hearing this and recognizing pieces of your own life, I hope you look at where you are standing and what you are carrying that was never meant to be held alone. And if my story kept you company to the end, thank you for listening. When you are ready for another one, I will be here.